Afternoon, Commissioners. Mark Freeze, Habitat Division Administrator for the record. I apologize for being late. I thought there was one more agenda item between us and this topic. Anyways, we will proceed. So here today, as part of the support material, there's a letter from the Coalition for Healthy Nevada Lands, Wildlife, and Free Roaming Horses. The request has been asked if this commission wants to sign on to this letter. Note that this letter was already submitted December 8th, and so it wouldn't be a sign-on letter. We could, if directed by the commission, write a letter from Chairman Cavilla and attaching their support letter and sending a separate letter to Tracy Stone-Manning. So that's what's before you here. The content in the coalition's letter largely aligns with Commission Policy 67. And I believe in some of the public comment period, there is a representative from the coalition who can help articulate their ask as well. With that, I'll stand for questions.
I guess I'll have one real quick, Mark. As far as, and I'm just not schooled on it, as far as the funding for the Wild Horse and Burro Act for 2024 and 2025, when does Congress basically set that funding that they're asking for the increase within the letter?
That's a good question, and I don't know if somebody else can help me on that one. I'm not sure.
Haley Musso for the record. Mr. Dixon is correct. Most of the time Congress does appropriations around the spring, usually like March to May. And then he's correct. Sometimes those will go back through, but I think it is pertinent if you're interested in sending a letter regarding appropriations to do it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and I guess that would be my question is, if any, I don't know where we are at for this year's appropriations, right? If that ship has already sailed or if it's still out there, or Director Janae.
Yeah, thank you. So as most folks are familiar, as this continuing resolution discussions have still been ongoing. And so those appropriations discussions for the next year are kind of slowed up. So there's still opportunity this spring to provide that comment, should there be a wish to try to influence or, you know, put some messaging in about increased appropriations or something like that. So it's still a process that's open, but yeah, it's mostly because of the delays in the continuing resolution.
Any additional questions or comments from the commission before I open it up? Seeing none, any cab comment in Clark County?
I'm not sure how, oh, it works. Okay, it's on. So to bring things up to date, right now, the House Appropriations Committee is looking at a 4 to 5% decrease in funding for the next fiscal year compared to this year. This does not bode well for dealing with wild horses. What will happen and what the Senate does to that, I don't know. But right now, it's not looking like we're going to have more money. So everything we can do to urge more funding is incredibly important. Essentially, the rest of the states don't have nearly the kind of problem with horses and burros that Nevada does. And so it's really incumbent upon us to really raise our hands, raise the flag and say, we really need money here. We've really got a problem, because no one's going to come to our help. So it's up to us to help ourselves by raising the flag and saying, we have a crisis at hand here and we need money now. But if we don't get money now, it's going to take a lot more money in future, because populations of wild animals basically increase geometrically. So that means they double and then they quadruple and it goes crazy. So right now we can expect almost 10,000 foals this year nationwide, 5,000 or more here in Nevada. So if we're only gathering 5,000 animals, we're just staying constant. We're not making any progress. And that's what people don't understand, is that whatever you see out there today, if you don't do anything, you're going to have a lot more next year. And the longer you put it off, the bigger the annual increase. So it's really, really critical that we sign, in my opinion, that we sign on to this letter, do everything we can to convince our congressional delegation to be really supportive. And you've got one person, Dina Titus, who's never going to support this. So we really need to get the rest of the delegation and get everybody on board. And I think Tracy Stone-Manning and the people in the Washington office of the BLM, they get it, but they can't change the amount of money. They can provide information to Congress, and they do that. But the more support they have and the more documentation from people like the commission that this is important, the better the chances of actually getting the money that is critical to moving forward on this issue. And I can provide more information about the history of it if anybody wants it.
Thank you. Any additional cab comment in Las Vegas?
Paul Dixon, Chair of Clark Cab. I appreciate John giving his personal information there. He did that at the cabin. I let him go first so he could share with you on that stuff. The cab did feel that the commission should sign on and support this type of letter. The letter, although not perfect, it's a very good start for getting to move things. When we look at other wildlife in this state, when we have fires, we have depredation hunts. We go in and we do things to remove animals when we get too many in the population and they're causing damage or they're over harvesting in their habitat. And so I think one of the big things that everybody has seen, whether it was the horse rich dirt poor video or some of the letters that came out from the horse advocacy groups, there are a lot of horses suffering on the range. When they moved horses off the Spring Mountains here a few years ago in Vegas area here, I think 90+%, I don't know the exact number, were euthanized because of poor body condition. And when you start looking at those sort of things, we have to look at animal welfare. And although not perfect roundups or other things, we really do, as John said, have to look at how you reduce the numbers. Once you get down to AMU type units, the number of animals you want to have per unit, then we can really focus on things like birth control and other things to maintain populations. But just trying to maintain a population right now where it is not going to help the landscape or the animals. And we see that. I mean, we see it everywhere when we look in the state, and that's the big discussion. I mean, I devoted in our meeting, which is only 3.5 hours long, we devoted over an hour to just this topic. So we had a lot of public comment and discussion on it. And there's a lot of energy around this and has been for many years. I got onto the cab 16 years ago because of the wild horse issue after I'd went hunting and saw the devastation that horses were doing in the Dolly Gardens and the Spruce Mountains and wanted to know what we were going to do about it. And what I've seen is a lot of let's talk and ask things. And although the cab did not vote on this, from my personal perspective, the only way that we've ever gotten the federal government to give more funding is to sue them. And we have avoided that for 16 years through a lot of administrations here and department heads. And at some point, when John tells you they're going to cut the budget this year, they will. But until we actually sue the federal government, I don't think we're ever going to get the attention we need in the state to really deal with our wild horse and burro issues so that those animals don't suffer in the wild. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Any additional cab comment in Las Vegas? Any cab comment on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Caviglia, could I just remind our Zoom attendees that at this moment, we're asking for comments from our CAB members only. Thank you. Go ahead, Ryan.
Hi, this is Ryan Brown with the OWHO Cab. I'd just like to echo what these guys are saying. You know, we truly have a wild horse problem in Nevada, which you guys are all aware of. We support signing the letter, but if that ship sailed, we would support the commission writing their own letter to echo these concerns. Thank you.
Brown, any additional cab comment on Zoom? No. Okay, any public comment in Las Vegas?
Hello, my name is Helen Foley, and I am the legislative advocate for the American Wild Horse Conservation. Because I represent an organization, I respectfully request 6 minutes. Thank you. The American Wild Horse Conservation is the largest wild horse and burro protection organization in the nation, with more than 16,000 Nevada supporters. We urge you to reject the request to sign on to this Coalition for Healthy Nevada letter to the BLM director, Tracy Stone-Manning, to request congressional funding for mass roundups and removal of wild horses from Nevada public lands. I have to start out by saying we recognize that there is a population problem in Nevada, but wild horse roundups is not the solution. And as the budget continues to be reduced, we think there's a better way. The letter seeks to the reduction of Nevada's wild horse population to the low appropriate management level of just 12,811 individuals in 5 years, requiring the removal of well over 40,000 animals at a cost of $40 million to capture and remove, and as much as $2 billion to maintain in holding facilities over their lifetimes.
Dude, it's Ryan. Hey, dude, I had an international hunting question for you.
Okay. The requested action would devastate Nevada's wild horse populations, leaving behind remnant herds with a density of 1 horse per 1,100 acres of land, making these significant ecotourism attractions difficult, if not impossible, to find for people visiting and spending money in our state. The mass removals would add tens of thousands of horses to the BLM holding facilities that already confine an astounding 62,000 animals at a cost to taxpayers of $109 million annually. Wild horse roundups and removals represent a failed approach to wild horse management. We all know that. And without fertility control, these costly mass removals would at best kick the can down the road until populations increase again, resulting in need for more roundups in an endless and unsustainable cycle. This keeps federal money flowing to the livestock contractors who earn millions for rounding up wild horses with helicopters and confining them in holding pens, but it does nothing to effectively manage these cherished Nevada wild herds. It's been over a decade since the National Academy of Sciences recommended that the BLM use fertility control as a more affordable and satisfactory answer than continuing to remove wild horses to long-term holding facilities. BLM is creating the problem it is complaining about. Even the National Academy of Sciences said we need to find a more affordable and satisfactory answer than continuing to remove wild horses to these facilities. So these roundups continue. Meanwhile, our Virginia Range Wild Horse Fertility Control Program has proven there's a better way to manage wild horses. The program is now the largest of its kind in the world. This year, there is a published review, peer review science affirming the feasibility and efficacy of the program. I urge you all to read this report, because within 4 years, more than 70% of the breeding age mares were darted with the reversible PZP fertility control vaccine, resulting in a 58% reduction in foaling during the study period. By the end of 2023, foal births on the Virginia Range were reduced by 66%. Fertility control works, and it's 96% less expensive than rounding up and removing horses from the range. And it spares taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars if the agency would just focus on fertility control instead of removal of the horses. The coalition's letter to the BLM blames wild horses for range degradation in Nevada. This is a tactic to divert away from the largest cause of rangeland destruction in the West: livestock grazing. In Nevada, wild horses live on just 14 million of the 43 million acres of BLM land grazed by livestock. The largest cause of failing rangeland health standards on the BLM land in Nevada is livestock grazing, not wild horses. If this was truly about making the urgent progress toward healthy rangelands, why is the coalition singling out wild horses when there's clearly a larger systemic problem affecting millions more acres? The Coalition for Healthy Nevada Lands is not a registered entity in Nevada or a registered charity with the IRS. Its website does not reveal its membership or organizational leadership or the purpose of the funds it is raising. The coalition lacks transparency, but clearly advocates the agenda of commercial interests like livestock grazing and wildlife trapping that seeks to profit from the public lands where public horses roam. The public interest, on the other hand, strongly backs the wild horse protection. Polls show that 86% of Nevadans agree that wild horses are defining symbols of our state and want them protected humanely and not slaughtered. This past weekend, over 23,000 citizens sent letters to Congress in support of Congresswoman Dina Titus's bill to ban helicopter roundups. This winter, national media focused on cruelty to helicopter roundups and the trauma and injury.
That's your
injuries it
6
does.
minutes. Thank you.
Okay, just to say that we want to actively work with you to promote humane, publicly acceptable, and sustainable policies. And we thank you very much.
Thank you. Additional public,
A copy of my letter for the record.
you can give it, yep.
Thank you.
Additional public comment in Las Vegas. All right, seeing none, I'll take it to public comment on Zoom.
Thank you. We have quite a few attendees on Zoom this morning. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand. That's to the right of your name and keep it raised until you speak. Please identify yourself before you speak. If you go over your allotted 3 or 6 minutes, you will be muted and we will go to the next speaker. Thank you. Go ahead, Dre.
Thank you. My name is Dre Armand, for the record, speaking on behalf of the Nevada chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Backcountry Hunters and Anglers is an international organization which seeks to ensure North America's outdoor heritage of hunting and fishing in a natural setting through education and work on behalf of our public lands, waters, and wildlife. The Nevada chapter acts as an extension of this mission by activating hunters and anglers across the state to work together to preserve our hunting and fishing heritage through stewardship and community engagement. Our freedom to hunt and fish depends on habitat, as does the hundreds of millions of dollars generated from hunting and fishing activities in Nevada each year. On behalf of hundreds of hunters and anglers across the state, we recommend that the commission support the letter drafted by the Coalition for Healthy Nevada Lands. Feral horse populations far beyond AML on our public lands are one of the greatest threats to our natural systems across Nevada's vast landscapes, and we urge you to do everything in your power to advocate for adequate resources and strategy to restore balance to Nevada's iconic rangelands. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Craig, please.
Yeah, yes, I'm with the my name's Craig Carpenter Downer, and I'm a wildlife ecologist. I have a nonprofit called the Andean Tapir Fund, also known as the Wild Horse and Burro Fund. And don't agree with the chemical sterilization of these horses. I think it goes contrary to the true purpose of the Wild Free Roaming Horse and Burros Act. Would like to suggest a much better approach called reserve design. It's related to rewilding. It's by which, through the formation of mature social bands and allowing these horses or birds to fill their ecological niches in a truly viable habitat for a genetically viable population, they will be able to self-stabilize. But the problem has been that these animals are being subject to a squeeze play. And there's a lot of dishonesty and hypocrisy going on among our officials and among the people in control here. I think they're kind of blinded by their own selfishness, and they're very backward looking. I've delved a lot into this issue, and these are deeply rooted natives. And they're a different kind of herbivore with a different digestive system, different lifestyle, different teeth structure, hoof structure, which actually complements these cloven-hoofed rumen fermenting herbivores. And there's a lot of studies that prove that they do truly contribute to the enhancement of an ecosystem, increasing its resilience, its ability to withstand global warming through increased carbon sequestration. And I have done a number of investigations and reports on this. I submitted a 5-page summary of my statement to you, and I would appreciate you would make this available to everyone on your board or to the public who's interested. And I also list the various studies and articles that I and other people have done that support my stand. I think there needs to be a much larger number. I think these appropriate management levels are extremely unfair. Do you realize they represent thousands of legal habitat acres for per individual wild horse or burro? So how can this be fair? I think generally there's a ganging up against them. And it's very similar to what happened to the Native Americans when we made treaties with them to let them continue their native way of life.
All right, additional public comment.
Go ahead, please, Laura in Carson City. Laura, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, good. Dear Advisory Board, I am writing today to express my opposition to signing the letter to BLM National Director Tracy Stone-Manning. I'm sorry, my name's Laura Fusen. I'm in Carson City, Nevada, and I'm a wild horse advocate. Nevada herd management areas need to be updated and researched. The herd management areas are not utilized to their full potential and are mismanaged. Some of these HMAs are overpopulated, as we have been hearing, and some are absent of any horses, while more are at their achieved populations. A separate agency needs to be formed, separate from BLM, appointed by the government to manage Nevada's biggest wildlife issue, taking more horses and burros off the land and penning them for years is not cost effective and a major hit to government spending. There is a better way. Through private and public herd management programs such as sanctuaries, these penned wild equines can be maintained and actually useful in our conservation of land. They can graze on grasses that support wildfires and they can be managed for population control. Holding pens can be removed and the land reused for horse-related education, open space recreation, and destination vacations. Horse adoptions cannot fulfill the 10,000 plus currently penned. Our native horses are recognized and followed by people all over the world. All eyes are on BLM management and the cruel helicopter roundups. There is a better way. HMA must be reassessed and horses rewild to specific areas. Please stop kicking the can down the road and continue the management for extinction. Approval of this letter is not solving any detail of wildlife management. Do not allow mining, cattlemen, or big game hunters to sway you. Recognize this letter from the Coalition for Healthy Nevada Lands as misrepresented, outdated, non-factual entity that it is. The public is very aware of the collusion going on with these groups. Please do not support this letter. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please, Mr. Belding. Mr. Belding, if you unmute yourself, please, and go ahead.
I hit the wrong button. It was on my screen. Okay, here we go. Mel Belding for the record, Washoe County Public. A question was asked earlier on the budget for the feral horse program. Appropriators also cut $5.9 million from the Bureau's wild horse and burro program budget to $141.9 million from $147.8 in enacted levels. That's $12.8 million less than the administration's request. I would also like to address this PZP for herd sterilization or birth control. PZP in the studies, they found that PZP, which is what the person was advocating for, has caused abandonment and no colostrum in the mare's milk. It is very critical that the herd size is small and in smaller areas. The horses that they mentioned are the Virginia range horses, and they are very acclimated to humans because of the diversionary feeding areas that these horses have. Horses on BLM lands cannot be fed extra. The main thing is they want to take away a right. And this is what really rubs me here. They're wanting to take away a right that a leasee has on BLM or forestry. These are rights. These are not someone saying, well, let's just take them. So I think we all ought to be aware that these are rights that these leasees have, and they're entitled to those grazing rights. I urge you to sign on to the letter. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional public comment.
Thank you, Karen. Go ahead.
Did that work? Can you
Yes.
hear me?
We can.
Oh,
Go ahead.
okay. This is Karen Boger calling, Boeger. I'm part of that now infamous group called Coalition for Healthy Nevada Lands in short. And oh my gosh, now it's sort of wrecked what I was going to say because there's so much information to clarify for you. But
We lost you.
am I back?
You're back now. Yep.
I don't know. Honestly, my technology out here in this remote little spot is not too convenient. Anyway, the coalition is indeed going to resubmit this letter once we've collected more signatures from people who have told us and entities that they are considering it and signing on. So we do hope that you will unanimously support this letter. It does indeed, as was noted, complement policy 67 in terms of how management should happen in order to keep that thriving ecological balance with all of our wide diversity of wildlife that's trying to exist out there at the same time. And so, but I do want to assure you that we, the Coalition for Healthy Nevada Lands, are indeed not an organization. We're not a 501c3. We're a handful of little volunteers who vary between maybe 10 of us or 12 of us, and we volunteer all our time and efforts on this issue because we are passionate about it. At the same time, we wear many other hats, many other issues, several other boards that we're responsible to also besides this event. And no, we get no payment from anyone. Granted, we had some contribution to help us put on a panel or two, but that's about it. So coming back to the letter, we really urge you to unanimously sign on to this, as did the Sagebrush Ecosystem Council just recently, because it's very important for BLM to show Congress that there is a wide and deep breadth spectrum of stakeholders who support BLM getting to AML speedily with a 5-year plan of dedicated dollars, which would be a lot of dollars, granted, using all management authorities to do so. The health of our public lands and all our creatures and plants that reside there is our savings account for future generations to come. Please do help all of us and BLM to get Congress's attention. Thank you very much for this time and opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead. Telephone caller with the last 3 digits of 705. Don't forget to identify yourself and please go ahead and speak. Please unmute yourself, caller 705.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Hello. Yes. I've had a television program for 25 years investigating the wild horses, and I found it was that that's how I realized how corrupt our government was. And it was such a shock to me, and it hurt me so badly, as it's hurt millions of Americans. These wild horses and burros are so valuable to our land, and particularly now because they eat 30 pounds of brush daily, twigs. I've filmed them eating actual twigs as well. And they could stop our brush fires. And the livestock is never mentioned by the BLM, and that is the problem. I have filmed so much livestock. We see livestock all over this country, but we do not see our wildlife. We do not see the beauty of the buffalo and the wild horses thundering across the land. We don't see any of that. We see cattle, and the BLM continues to lie. As far as sterilization goes, that becomes a man-made product, and those animals are no longer wild, which under the Wild Free Roaming Horse and Burro Act, we're supposed to leave them alone. BLM is supposed to manage them with minimal management activity. So sterilizing them when their numbers are so low as it is, when we need to have wild horses in all the forests to help reduce all that brush fire instead of you mechanically coming in and chipping, I mean, listen, the lies have gone on for so long, and I just want to quote here, our task must be to free ourselves by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures, the whole of nature and its beauty. And that was by Albert Einstein. And there's no mention of the importance these animals are for fire and for ecology. They are priceless. And the greatness of this nation and the beauty of it is our wildlife and our wild places. It's not burger stands. And that's what we're becoming. We're becoming burger stands. I'm a vegan, and I'm a vegan because the wild horses taught me what an evil thing it is that we are doing by killing animals and eating them. And for 35 years, I haven't, and I'm healthy as can be. So Finally, the great Pythagoras long ago predicted that if human beings ate suffering captive animals, we would never free ourselves. We would become a warlike subhuman species without the capacity to spiritually save ourselves. And here we are, wars all over the planet, and fathers teaching their children to kill the very beings they love to cuddle as babies. I don't trust them.
Thank you. That was your 3 minutes. Additional public comment.
Thank you, Teresa. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Teresa Barber, and for the record, that's Barbour, and I'm from many different wild horse organizations, but I am a board member of a national nonprofit called Oregon Wild Horse Organization. I have, for nearly a decade, participated in administrative appeals to try to get the BLM to follow the Wild Horse and Burro Act. So we are with you in considering the letter where you ask them to follow the act, but we obviously are asking for them to do so in a very different way. When the act was created, it said that every area that had wild horses in 1971 was to be managed principally for wild horse and burro use. Now, we understand that's not exclusively, and obviously other uses could be on those areas. However, the horses should have principal use of those areas. And what we find is that the areas in Nevada that have both wild horses and livestock typically have an allocation to livestock of about 80% of the forage on the area. That is not giving principal use to the wild horses and burros. BLM explains this by saying, well, any area we called a range with a capital R are the areas where we manage principally for wild horses and burros, but we don't do it on the rest of them because we called it a herd area or a herd management area. There is no place in the regulations where it states that if you call it something else, the requirement to manage it principally for wild horses or burros is therefore removed. That does not exist in the law. However, the horses have been pushed into smaller and smaller areas because the original areas, most of which were called herd areas, were separated when FLPMA came about and said, okay, you have to manage public lands for multiple uses. So then BLM tended to create a little small area within the big HA, which was then called an HMA or herd management area. So the horses got pushed into these small places, and then all of a sudden BLM started screaming overpopulation. And then you could get into how they developed population levels, which the NAS report of 2013 said was not done scientifically. It was done for administrative ease. It was basically what was left over after livestock and wildlife got their share. And that's not an appropriate way to develop population levels. And this letter that you're considering absolutely does not take into consideration the impact of climate of horses versus the livestock that are out there. And I think that's horribly irresponsible. And I also wanted to add, listening to the stuff that you're talking about, people are talking about how population increases, and you don't take into account the fact that most of the mares in Nevada are being treated with fertility control, which means they're not going to increase in population each year at the same rate. So you've got to take that into consideration. And also, somebody spoke about a herd of starving horses that was removed. That was an isolated incident. It is not what we see coming off the range. What we see coming off the range are very fat and healthy horses, and we really ask you to consider not submitting that letter the way it's written and doing some more research. And I am very happy to connect with anyone who wants to have a serious conversation with that and not just scapegoat our horses for livestock purposes or hunting or angling, because these horses are not doing the damage out there. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Volz. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning. For the record, Fred Volz. The proposed letter for sign-on contains no bona fide conservation organizations supporting the data presented or the approaches proposed to the BLM. Based on BLM's own data, a mere 720 mares received fertility control in fiscal year 2023 out of a guesstimated Nevada wild horse and burro population of just over 49,000 as of January 22nd, 2024. Fertility control has not been used on a widespread basis, so an incorrect conclusion has been claimed by the letter's signatories without any probing for readily available public information. Previous year's fertility control efforts were minuscule too. BLM's total incarcerated wild horse and burro population nationwide in BLM-operated facilities, excluding the private ones that BLM also uses, numbers just under 65,000 as of January 2024. By contrast, Nevada's human prison system has 10,622 total inmates as of March 5th, 2024. Thus, BLM runs a national prison system 6 times the size of Nevada's human prison system. If the ranching and hunting groups proposing this letter were really concerned about habitat and all wildlife, then why aren't they suggesting veterinarian services to help suffering wildlife, more water hauls to guzzlers, and substantially reducing the 500,000 livestock that graze on public lands at bargain basement prices? A reasonable path forward for BLM to find more money includes increasing livestock grazing prices to market rates, since Nevada livestock represent more than 10 times the number of wild horses and burros. Why isn't BLM being challenged to implement widespread fertility darting with embedded microchips that could be read from a distance and assess if or when the wild horse or burro was last given fertility control drugs? This letter could have pursued so many constructive rather than destructive alternatives, but chose imprisonment and death as its solutions. The letter does not deserve the commission's endorsement. Wildlife deserves to live in the wild, just as people seek freedom. And I would ask that my comments be added to the record verbatim. Thank you.
Go ahead, please, Mary. Please.
Can you hear me? Am I? Okay, can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, that is a miracle. I've been trying to do this for 15 minutes. My name is Mary Siafi, and I'm president of the Pine Nut Wild Horse Advocates in Gardnerville, Nevada. Our organization is a local 501c3 to protect the wild horses in the Fish Springs area of Douglas County. And we have an amazing team of certified darters. We have reduced the reproduction rate of our range by over 90%. We pride ourselves at having logical solutions to our horses in the range they roam on. It appears that the coalition, from a document dated of July 31st, 2002 to NACO, the coalition was formed only to address current impacts of wild horses. They had no other goals that we could find. They didn't have any range improvements in place. They didn't try to restore lands or protect wildlife. Removing wild horses was their primary goal. We're asking you to reject this letter and depend on information from unbiased experts and information from the National Academy of Science. The efforts needed to increase dramatically on PZP birth control. We're not finding any of the side effects of PZP. We've been now using it for 10 years, as have many other organizations. The only thing we have seen is a dramatic reduction in the reproduction rate of our range. What we're suggesting is that you don't paint the entire state of Nevada with one broad brush. Every area of Nevada is not the same. They don't have the same conditions. Some areas may have horses that are struggling, while other areas like ours are all healthy horses in good body scores. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Anna Maria.
Hi, my name is Anna Maria Balstrid. I would just like to respond to the previous comment about the horses suffering. I'm personally so sick of hearing pro-coalition people lamenting about the poor horses suffering when they are asking for more roundups. More roundups means more broken necks, more broken legs, foals dying of heat exhaustion on the range. So I'm writing my comment in opposition to the letter by the Coalition for Healthy Nevada Lands, urging for more money for further wild horse and burro roundups. I am a citizen of this great country, a resident of awesome Nevada, and a dutiful federal taxpayer. The coalition would have you believe that the horses and burros are wreaking havoc on our native wildlife and fragile arid rangeland ecosystems. Quote, they mention squirrels and mule deer, but nowhere is there any mention of the millions of animals that do indeed dominate the Nevada rangelands in sheer numbers, the livestock. 43 million acres of Nevada's public land is authorized for grazing. To put that into perspective, that is about twice the size of South Carolina or Kentucky. The cost of grazing on public lands per month, the AUM, is $1.35 for a cow and a calf in 2023. That is, it costs approximately $17 to graze a cow and a calf on public lands for an entire year. But government contract records show that there is an even more lucrative business out there on the range. Wild horse roundups have become a self-perpetuating enterprise. Millions and millions of dollars paid to these service contractors. The coalition would have you believe that this is, quote, a crisis on our public lands, and that the only way to deal with such a crisis is to have the government pay out millions more to these contractors. Because this is, after all, taxpayers' money, millions and millions of dollars going to livestock operators to round up, remove, and feed these wild horses. The price difference between grazing a cow on public land versus removing a wild horse to feed in feedlots is astounding. While this may provide very lucrative jobs for a relatively few, this is in essence subsidization by taxpayers' money. I must therefore, as a taxpayer, conclude that the letter from the coalition asking for further funding for further roundups is not based on any sound economic sense. If the coalition is really concerned about the health of our rangeland.
Caller with a phone number ending 837, please identify yourself at the beginning of your talk, and you are free to talk now. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm in California, Trinidad, California. I'm very concerned about the lawlessness that's been going on for a long time in this country. The lies going back to the days when we broke all the treaties with the Native Americans, when there was 30 to 60 million buffalo roaming around, and bounties were put on them so we could get rid of the Native Americans who depended on the buffalo for their survival. And by the way, 30 to 60 million buffalo, they were good for the land. I don't believe the propaganda. These animals, the land was teeming with animals back in the day, and they were good for the land. and now there's very few animals, even lack of deer populations. In Yellowstone, the ranchers don't want the buffalo populating and competing, so they send the Yellowstone going across the border, so they send 1,000 to be slaughtered every year because they're a threat to the cattle. And it's the same with the wild horses. They're a threat to the cattle and the hunting because they eat forage. And they want to have more deer for the hunters and more forage for the cattle so they can make more money. But the cattle and the humans, especially the humans, do much more harm than the wild horses. Much more damage. The roads, hauling in water for the cattle, big trucks tearing up the landscape and little dirt roads, etc. And we put them in little holding tanks. So how cruel can that be? When Mahatma Gandhi, in his autobiography, it was either him or his wife who said that the life of a lamb is no less than valuable than the life of a human being. And his wife absolutely refused to eat any animal products. He became a vegan later. And so, we need to respect wildlife. The Wild Horse Free Roaming Burro Act is a great act. It needs to be followed. Minimum interference, not zeroing out the land for wild horses, which has happened in so many acres, and now they've been replaced with cattle. The horses are supposed to be the principal presence. They're supposed to have minimal interference. Yes, they're concern over overpopulation due to the lack of predators. The government offers bounties quite often to remove predators so there will be more deer for hunters. Interfering so much with the wildlife. It's best we leave nature alone. It's done very well before we came on the scene. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Somehow I got muted. I just want to thank
Your 3 minutes are up.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Henry, please go ahead. Henry, please unmute yourself.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
For the record, Henry Krinka, speaking for the Nevada Outfitters and Guides Association. For the record, we'd like the commission to support the sign-on for the wild horse and burro letter for the BLM. These are not wild horses. These are feral horses. And they're devastating our state with the habitat that they're consuming that our wildlife needs to survive. They're just, I'm fourth generation here. I've seen it since the 70s. And it's worse and worse. So we really believe that now is time to attack, and thank you.
All right, any additional public comment on Zoom? All right, with that, I am going to close public comment and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Mr. Walter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I appreciate all the comments and discussion on this issue. Certainly it's healthy and what keeps this country rolling. That said, I'm not going to engage in a discussion about the validity of administrative discretion or consultation or failures of particular agencies. I think the simple question before us is that
a sign on to this letter in my position furthers and supports the goals of policy 67. And with that, I'm in support.
Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I'm not in a position, nor is it my intent to defend the coalition. I do know an awful lot of those folks that are part of that group that have gotten together to try to move the needle on wild horse challenges in Nevada. I've always found them to be decent, and I'm talking to the commission at this point. I'm not trying to change people's minds. But they did put together and I wish somebody from the coalition was here to talk about it and be a little more, they'd be better at talking about it. But they did put together a plan. It was called the Path Forward. And we, as a commission, it's been a little while, but we signed on to it in support of that. And it basically outlined, I believe it was a 4-step process. It was based on a collaboration of a really significant, diverse group of people. Everything from wild horse advocates to cattlemen, to sportsmen's groups, to local governments, to it was a wide array of a broad array of interests that had worked on that proposal. It's not substantially different from what we hear people wanting to do now with the fertility control, that kind of stuff. Really, the primary difference is timeframes, how you get there. As part of that path forward, what we signed on to was, hey, we can buy off on enhancing adoptions, cleaning up the process for moving animals out of these holding pens and into private ownership or whatever it might take there. Try to bring the roundups, kind of bring those numbers down so we're not spending tons of money doing those and holding animals. Recognizing that there's a point where fertility does become effective. But the big difference was the coalition and this path forward couldn't buy into the time frame. It was just too long. Concern for what's happening on the range and the habitats now. So the whole idea was, let's get some of the big numbers off, get them down to AMLs, and get those horse numbers down so that these other efforts can be more effective. It's way different treating animals out on the OWHO Desert or out in Monitor Valley or down in Lincoln County than it is treating animals in the Virginia range or, maybe perhaps down. I appreciate what folks are doing to help their horse numbers, their herd management with the fertility efforts. I don't want my vote today to reflect that I don't appreciate or recognize those efforts. It's time that people are putting in. It's volunteer work. I appreciate that. I fall into the camp with the coalition. I think it's a timing issue. We don't have 20 years to get there. That's a pretty sustained burn, a substantial one across the state of Nevada. I'm not convinced that we can sustain that for 20 years to get there in 20 years. I think this needs to be done sooner than later. And the only real mechanism to do that I'm aware of is to remove horses to AML now. So that's where I'm at.
Vice Chair Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I appreciate the public comment and the dialogue and all of the correspondence that I've received, and I've taken the liberty to obviously listen to that stuff and read the various emails and communications. And given today's public comment, I think, one of the main things that continues to stick out at me is that everybody seems to agree on that there is an overpopulation of horses in the state of Nevada. Where the rub becomes is how do we fix that, right? So at any rate, in terms of some of these other items that were talked about, the fertility, again, I think there's, those things could possibly work. But to Commissioner McNinch's comments, I think that, we have to get down to an AML, an appropriate management level. And we are so far out of line with those numbers that I think, some of these other items that have been proposed, fertility, other things, I just don't think we get there until we get down to, I don't think those can be effective until we get down to an appropriate management level. As it relates to this specific issue, again, the question becomes the question is whether we sign on to this letter or not. My 2 cents, I guess, and where my head is with this is I agree with the letter. I support what the coalition is doing. However, I think that given our own policy 67, I think I would maybe much prefer to have us draft our own letter expressing our concerns and reiterating our policy 67, in addition to us, the commission, sending a letter to the BLM. I'd also like and ask that maybe we look to send letters as well to our congressional delegates in addition to the BLM. So anyway, that's where my head's at.
Yeah, and I guess I think commission, our policy 67 kind of lays it out. Everything we're discussing is already in policy 67. In policy 67, we talk about lowering the population levels to AML. And then we talk about using the fertility treatments at that point. Now it's all in policy 67. And I myself, I'm kind of on the same page as Vice Chair Rogers. I don't know if it'd be more appropriate for the commission if we were to draft our own letter, not necessarily attach ourselves to the coalition, but the commission, we could write our own letter. And I agree with Vice Chair Rogers as well. We don't just send it to the BLM, we also send it to our delegation as well. That would be I would lean more towards that than attaching the commission to the coalition's letter myself. But I think I agree with everything everyone else has said. And I think commission policy 67, if everybody reads it, it lays out the commission. We put some thought into that when we did that a couple of years ago. We didn't have as much public involvement, I think, at that time, but we did have a fair amount of discussion when we wrote that policy. So that's what I would lean towards. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with kind of Tommy, with you and what Commissioner Rogers is saying too, but I also kind of like what the coalition put together. And as I was looking down the list of signees on here, and I think it really is only fitting that we sign on to this as well. We all kind of agree with what the letter says. We want to, I think what I'm hearing from you is that you would think if we made our own letter, make what might make more of a difference or a little more of a powerful impact. So I don't know. So could we go ahead and sign on to this and then go ahead and write our own letter besides? Sign on to this, and then if we want to write our own letter, then go ahead and write our own letter and direct it to Commissioner Rogers is saying we need to direct it to. But then I guess I also have a question for Dag Burkett, because the way this is agendized, can we talk about writing our own letter, or we stuck to the to this letter? Are we kind of getting over our skis a little bit?
I appreciate the question. Thank you. I want to go back and reread the agenda. Yeah, I think the agenda is pretty focused. It's really limited to sign on. You certainly could re-agendize it for the next meeting and do exactly what you're asking to do. If that's not influencing, I'm not attempting to influence what this commission does, but you can certainly re-agendize it and do your own letter later.
yeah, I guess my time on the commission, I don't recall us ever really signing on to another organization's letter. When we did make a statement, the commission wrote its own letter, right? I don't know where everybody's at. If the commission wants to do that, to start doing that, that's kind of where I'm at. When we've had stuff come up before, we wrote our own,
So, Mr. Chairman, so with that in mind, maybe we have, maybe it's difficult to do our own letter, but if we have, I mean, we're talking about signing on to this, and I think what we're saying is that if we choose not to sign on, I'm not sure we're wandering too far to say that we would prefer to do our own letter, that basically put our name on the letter rather than signing on to this particular one. I don't know, maybe we're pushing the boundaries. I don't like to play games like that. I'm not trying to play a game here. I'm just throwing that out and asking Dag Burkett if that's,
Can you clarify? Say that one more
well,
time.
I guess my thought is that you have a letter with information in it. And we're being asked to put our name at the back of the letter. Is it agendized so specifically that the only option here is to put our name on the back of this? What if we took basically largely what's in here and put it in a letter to, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean,
Just put it
the
on our letter.
purpose of the open meeting law on this issue is to give the public adequate understanding of what you're going to do on a particular issue. Here, the question was generally signing on to the wild horse and burro letter. You could do it through your own through the commission as well in your own way. I don't think that's misleading the public. I think drafting a separate letter would not be within the scope of this agenda item.
So
Does that make sense?
So you're saying that if we take basically what's written in here and put it on our letterhead.
Yeah, and simply say we're signing on to, I would include the language that you're signing on because that's what your agenda item says.
The only thing that kind of trips me up is the time frame. I have no problem bringing this back and having our conversation at the May meeting to do our own letter. That's I'm not worried about that, except for the time frame. And right now, if you had to put money on, are we going to be missing an appropriation opportunity? That moves forward without further consideration after May. I'm not sure that's going to be the case at the rate we're going these days, but so there might still be time.
So, I guess in listening to the Dag Burkett's comments here, and trying to accomplish both these goals being discussed at the commission level, I do not see the harm, and I'm just kind of wondering where everybody is at in we draft a cover letter stating that we are signing on and supporting it, listing the reasons we are having in this discussion within that cover letter, and we can forward the cover letter together with the coalition letter to the director of BLM, as well as any delegates we deem appropriate at some, at some juncture.
Yeah, and I guess for me too, I'm absolutely not against the letter. I just personally, I think having a letter on, the commission's letterhead coming right from the commission, I think it just carries more weight than being attached at the end in the list. I just honestly do. That's just kind of where my thought process is.
So Commissioner Walter, what you're suggesting, is that kind of what the Tommy just sum up what you were thinking?
Well, I mean, I'm addressing, some of the time concerns, and that kind of thing, suggesting that we draft a cover letter, with this letter as an attachment, stating the reasons why we support it and signing on to it, or just stating in the cover letter we support the attached letter and include the reasons we're having in our discussion today.
Okay, and Commissioner Walter, if that was in the form of a motion, I would support it.
I'll make that a motion. Mr. Barnes, do I need to make it more clear?
That's a motion. I will second it.
And I guess just for clarification, I think typically when we do a letter like this, it would be if, and I'm not making your motion, but the motion would be that you would give the leeway for myself as chair to work with the department to draft that letter, cover letter in support of the coalition's letter.
Correct.
Basically.
And not to insert myself here, but I can certainly work with you to make sure that, again, it meets the agenda item focused. And thank you, Commissioner Barnes, for bringing this up.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that Chairman Caviglia has the authority to work with the department to draft a cover letter in support of the coalition's letter.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries